Welcome to our deep dive, exploring love, social connection, and their impact on well-being.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, and we're going to be using Social Intelligence by Daniel Goleman,
Okay,
specifically chapters 5 and 6.
great.
And he really dives into the neuroscience and psychology behind these essential aspects of human experience.
Right.
So by the end, you'll not only understand the complex interplay of brain systems and hormones and emotions, all that's involved,
Wow.
but also gain some practical takeaways for enriching your own relationships and boosting your resilience.
That's fantastic. I think one of the things that struck me when I first read this book was that Goldman goes beyond the typical, definitions of love
Right.
and reveals its intricate connection to our biology. He
hmm
breaks down love into three distinct systems: attachment, caregiving, and sex,
Okay.
each with its own neural network and chemical drivers.
Oh, wow. So it's not just one love feeling, but rather three interconnected systems kind of working together.
That's so interesting. It makes those early stages of romantic love with all the, baby talk and those kind of regressive behaviors
Yay.
even more interesting.
Yeah.
It's like we're tapping into those primal needs for closeness and security that we develop as infants.
Precisely.
Right.
And what's fascinating is that these attachment styles, the avoidant, anxious, and secure,
Yeah.
they don't just shape our romantic relationships.
Oh,
They influence our friendships and even how we react to stress.
really?
Yeah, think about Brenda and Bob in the book.
Okay, yeah.
Their contrasting reactions to the loss of their baby really highlight how deeply ingrained these patterns can be.
It's like our early experiences really cast a long shadow
They do.
on our whole social world, not just our love lives.
Yeah.
And, thinking about this makes me think about Leah and the tarantula.
Okay.
Was her reaction to the spider linked to her anxious attachment style? Maybe formed in childhood?
Interesting.
Could that explain why she felt so overwhelmed by others' distress?
That's a very astute observation.
Oh.
It seems likely that her early experiences played a role in her heightened sensitivity to stress.
Okay, so we've talked about attachment, but what about desire?
Oh.
Where does that fit into all of this?
Well, desire is a key component of romantic love.
Okay.
And Goleman explores some intriguing gender differences in this area. When looking at a loved one, men's brains show heightened activity in visual processing and sexual arousal centers.
Ah.
Women, on the other hand, exhibit more activity in social circuitry and areas related to memory and attention.
So men are more visually driven and women focus more on the social and emotional aspects.
Yeah.
I mean, that raises an interesting question. How do these brain differences translate to real-world relationship dynamics?
Well, it suggests that women might take more time to develop feelings of love, considering a wider range of factors beyond initial attraction.
Okay.
Anthropologist Helen Fisher even observed that casual sex for women is often not as casual as it is for men.
That's definitely something to consider.
It makes you think about the evolutionary and social influences that might be at play.
It does.
But so far, we've mainly been discussing brain regions.
Right.
What role do hormones play in love and connection?
Well, one hormone stands out, and that's oxytocin,
Oh.
often called the molecule of motherly love because of its crucial role in bonding and trust, especially between mothers and infants.
Yeah.
But Goleman reveals that its influence extends far beyond that.
Right.
Oxytocin plays a crucial role in reducing stress and creating a sense of security in all kinds of close relationships.
Oh.
Remember the woman who travels with her husband's pillowcase?
Oh, yeah?
She's literally carrying a source of oxytocin-induced comfort wherever she goes.
That's amazing.
It is.
It sounds like our relationships have a direct line to our biology,
Mhm.
influencing our hormones and how we experience the world.
Exactly. And this connection becomes even clearer when we look at the broader impact of social connection on well-being beyond romantic love.
So while romantic love is powerful, it's just one facet of the connection that shapes us.
Right.
Let's explore that broader impact of social connection on well-being.
Okay, so think about the social stress test,
Okay.
where people had to solve math problems while being harshly judged.
Oh, gosh.
That study revealed how powerfully social evaluation can trigger our stress response system.
I'm curious, how does this chronic stress from criticism actually manifest in our bodies?
Well, the HPA axis goes into overdrive, releasing a flood of cortisol. Over time, this prolonged cortisol exposure can have detrimental effects on our health.
Okay.
It's like constantly being on high alert,
Right.
which takes a toll on our physical and mental well-being.
So being criticized or judged negatively can actually impact our health.
It can.
Wow, that's a pretty sobering thought.
It is.
Is there any way to counteract these negative effects?
There is.
Okay.
Davidson's hand-holding study
Oh.
showed that the presence of a loved one can actually calm the brain's threat response. Simply holding hands with someone you trust can buffer you against the negative effects of stress.
So a good relationship can act as a shield against the stresses of life.
Exactly.
That's amazing. What's fascinating is that the calming effect was even stronger for wives who reported higher marital satisfaction.
Yes.
It's like having a built-in stress reliever right there in your hand.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's not just about romantic relationships either.
Okay.
Goleman highlights the tend and befriend response,
Wow.
which is a stress response unique to women
Okay.
that emphasizes the protective power of social connection, especially female friendships.
Okay, so strong friendships are crucial for women's well-being.
They are.
It's just so surprising that Goleman states that friendlessness can be as detrimental to a woman's health as smoking or obesity.
Whoa.
That's a powerful statement about the importance of those connections.
It is.
But while he champions the positive aspects of connection, he also cautions against the dangers of toxic relationships. Right.
He does.
Yeah.
The story of Leo and Sonia Tolstoy's turbulent marriage serves as a cautionary tale.
Okay.
Despite achieving literary greatness and having 13 children together,
Yeah.
their constant conflicts highlight the potential health impacts of chronic relationship stress.
Oh, wow.
It's a reminder that nurturing healthy connections is crucial for both our emotional and physical well-being.
So it's not just about having relationships, but about the quality and nature of those connections.
Exactly.
This raises an important question. How do these positive and negative relationship experiences actually impact our ability to perform at our best to other areas of life?
Well, Goleman explores this in his discussion of the inverted U of performance.
Oh, yeah.
He explains that both low and high levels of stress can hinder cognitive function, while moderate stress can actually enhance it.
Okay, so we need to find that sweet spot between complacency and overwhelm.
Exactly.
Could you elaborate a bit more on this inverted U?
Sure.
I'm having trouble visualizing it.
Imagine a bell curve where the peak represents optimal performance. Too little stress and you might lack the motivation to push yourself.
Right.
Too much stress and your performance plummets as anxiety takes over. The key is finding that sweet spot,
Got it.
where stress is a motivator rather than a detriment.
That makes a lot more sense. So where does frazzle fit into all of this?
Well, frazzle is what happens when anxiety essentially hijacks the brain's executive center, impairing our concentration, our memory, and our creativity.
Yeah.
Goleman's anecdote about the company restructuring and the disappearing employees
Right.
vividly illustrates how fear and uncertainty in the workplace can lead to frazzle and decreased productivity.
It's like our brains get overwhelmed and can't function at their best.
Yeah.
So it's not just about individual stress, but also the emotional climate of the workplace.
Right?
This makes me think about the idea of emotional contagion.
Yeah.
If a leader is stressed and anxious, would that actually impact the performance of their entire team?
That's precisely what the research suggests. A leader's emotions can have a ripple effect on the mood and performance of their team.
Really?
Think about the study where good news delivered with a sullen expression actually made people feel bad.
Wow. That's a powerful example of how emotional tone can outweigh even positive content.
Yeah.
So paying attention to our own emotions and the emotions of those around us, especially in leadership roles, seems incredibly important.
It is.
This deep dive is already making me rethink how I approach my relationships and my work.
That's great.
There's so much to unpack here.
There is, and we've only just begun to scratch the surface of how love and social connection affect our lives.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't wait to dive deeper.
Let's do it.
It's amazing how these seemingly intangible things like love and connection have such a profound impact on our biology.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it makes you realize that relationships aren't just some feel-good extra in life,
Right.
but like a fundamental part of our well-being.
I completely agree. And this connection between relationships and well-being becomes even more striking when we consider the role of compassion. Particularly in fields like healthcare. Goleman argues that a strong doctor-patient connection can actually lead to better health outcomes.
That makes sense. If you feel safe and heard by your doctor, you're more likely to trust their advice and follow through with the treatment plan.
Exactly.
Goleman emphasizes that it goes beyond just good communication skills, right?
Right. He highlights the need for genuine empathy and connection in medical care,
Okay.
urging doctors to see the human being in front of them, not just a collection of symptoms.
Hmm.
He shares this powerful anecdote about a detached surgeon who becomes a patient himself and suddenly experiences the fear and vulnerability he'd previously dismissed in others.
Wow.
It's a wake-up call about the importance of treating patients as whole people.
It's a reminder that we're all human,
Yeah.
doctors and patients alike. We all experience fear and vulnerability, especially when facing health challenges.
We do.
But this level of empathy and compassion, especially in a high-stress field like healthcare, can be incredibly draining. Didn't Goleman talk about the risks of compassion fatigue and the need for institutional support to help healthcare workers avoid burnout?
He did. He uses the example of Nancy Abernathy, a medical professor who lost her husband
Oh.
and was dreading returning to teach a class that involved sharing family photos.
Oh, wow.
Her students from the previous year surprised her by showing up to support her.
That's so nice.
It's a beautiful example of how shared compassion can create a sense of community and resilience, even in the face of grief.
That story is so touching.
Yeah,
It highlights the power of collective support, not just for patients, but for caregivers as well.
it does.
But for this shift to happen, it seems like we need to change the entire culture of healthcare,
Right.
moving away from a purely clinical approach towards a more human-centered one.
Absolutely. Goleman argues that this shift needs to happen both at the individual level, encouraging doctors and nurses to cultivate empathy and compassion,
Okay.
and at the institutional level by creating systems that support those qualities.
So it's not just about individual good intentions, but about systemic change.
Right.
Are there any concrete examples of what this might look like in practice?
One area Goleman focuses on is the medical interview.
Okay.
He sees it as a prime opportunity to build rapport and establish a strong doctor-patient connection. He even breaks down the interview into 7 distinct parts, offering guidance on how to make it more human-centered.
So it's not just about being a nice doctor, but about developing specific skills and techniques to improve communication and empathy.
Exactly.
Do these skills actually lead to measurable differences in patient care?
Yes, studies have shown that patients of doctors who excel at communication have better recall of instructions, higher treatment adherence,
Oh, wow.
and overall greater satisfaction with their care.
That's great.
There's even a business case for compassionate care.
Really?
Goleman mentions that many patients leave their healthcare providers because they're unhappy with how their doctor communicates with them.
So better communication and empathy can actually benefit both patients and healthcare organizations. It
Yes,
seems like a win-win situation.
it is.
I particularly love the story Goleman tells about Dr. Robin Youngson, anesthesiologist, who advocated for adding the right to be treated with compassion
Right.
to his country's legal code of patients' rights.
It's a powerful example of how one person's vision can spark a movement towards a more humane healthcare system.
That's awesome. Goleman stresses that ignoring this basic human need for compassion can lead to iatrogenic suffering,
Yes.
which is the additional pain and anguish patients experience when medical professionals are emotionally detached or dismissive.
Right. It's like adding insult to injury.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we move away from this model of detachment towards a more patient-centered or relationship-centered approach to medicine?
Well, Goleman suggests that healthcare providers need to prioritize the patient's emotional well-being alongside their physical health.
Okay.
This means actively listening to patients, acknowledging their fears and concerns, and providing emotional support throughout the treatment process.
So it's not just about fixing the physical problem, but about acknowledging and addressing the emotional impact of illness as well.
Exactly.
This idea of social connection impacting well-being goes beyond just doctor-patient relationships, right?
It does.
It's relevant in all areas of our lives.
Yes. Remember our discussion about stress and how it can negatively impact our health.
Yeah.
Well, Goleman dedicates a whole section to exploring the concept of social stress,
Okay.
which is the stress we experience as a result of our interactions with others.
Right. He uses the example of Hobbes the baboon, who terrorized his troop and caused their cortisol levels to skyrocket.
Yes. Exactly like the saying, one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch.
Yeah. Are you saying that social stress can be just as damaging to our health as physical stressors like injury or illness?
That's exactly what Goleman argues.
Wow.
He cites a study where people wore devices that monitored their blood pressure during interactions with others. Their blood pressure spiked the most when they were with people they felt ambivalent about. Those who sometimes made them feel good and sometimes made them feel terrible.
Those relationships where you're constantly on edge, never knowing what to expect.
Right.
I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, they can be very draining
They can be very draining.
because they require a high level of vigilance and effort.
Yeah.
Goleman even compares the stress of these ambivalent relationships to the stress of facing a hostile job interviewer.
Oh, wow.
Both situations trigger a cascade of physiological changes that over time can increase our risk for health problems.
So it's not just major conflicts or traumatic experiences that can harm our health.
No?
Even those everyday microstressors, those little annoyances and frustrations we experience in our relationships can add up over time.
Precisely. And Goleman supports this idea with research.
Yeah.
He cites a fascinating study by Sheldon Cohen, who intentionally gave people colds to study the factors that influence susceptibility.
Wow, they gave people colds.
They did. And he found that people with ongoing personal conflicts were more likely to get sick,
Oh, wow.
putting rocky relationships in the same risk category as vitamin C deficiency and poor sleep.
That's amazing. It makes you wonder if we're underestimating the impact of our relationships on our overall health.
We might be. But he also found that loneliness can make us more susceptible to colds, right?
Right. It seems counterintuitive that having fewer social contacts would make us more likely to get sick.
It does seem counterintuitive on the surface. But Cohen's research suggests that vibrant social connections actually boost our mood and limit negativity,
Okay,
which in turn strengthens our immune system.
got it.
So while socializing might increase our exposure to germs, the positive effects on our immune system seem to outweigh that risk.
That's fascinating. So having strong social connections can protect us from getting sick.
Yes.
It's like having an extra layer of defense.
It is. But what about the flip side?
Right.
How do toxic relationships impact our health? Goleman uses the example of Alyssa Janowitz, a sales manager who developed high blood pressure after her bosses started treating her unfairly.
Okay.
He links her experience to research showing that being the target of harsh criticism, especially when we feel powerless to do anything about it, can trigger a prolonged stress response that's detrimental to our health.
It's like that feeling of being trapped, having no control over a stressful situation.
Exactly.
It can really take a toll.
It can. Goleman highlights the research of Margaret Keeman and Sally Dickerson, who found that social stressors trigger the HPA axis to produce some of the highest levels of cortisol of any laboratory stress simulation.
Right.
They argue that this is because social evaluation threatens our social self, which is how we see ourselves through the eyes of others.
Right.
Being judged negatively can shake our sense of self-worth and belonging, triggering a powerful stress response.
So our social brains are highly sensitive to threats to our social standing. It's like being ostracized or rejected by the group. No wonder it triggers such a strong reaction.
Exactly. Didn't Goleman also discuss a study that followed a group of people over decades?
Oh, yeah.
To see how their relationships impacted their health?
Yeah. What was that one?
Yes. He discusses a fascinating longitudinal study of the graduating class of 1957.
Okay.
Researcher Richard Davidson followed up with them decades later to see how their relationships had impacted their health. What they found was a strong association between having a high-risk physical profile and an unfavorable cumulative emotional tone in the graduates' most important relationships.
So the quality of our relationships over the course of our lives can actually predict our physical health in later years.
It can. Are there specific examples from the study that illustrate this connection?
Yeah, I'd love to hear some.
Yes, they highlighted two classmates, Jane and Jill.
Okay.
Jane had a difficult childhood and a series of challenging relationships.
Okay.
And she had a high number of medical symptoms in her 60s. Jill, on the other hand, had a loving mother, a satisfying marriage, and a vibrant social life.
Okay.
And she reported very few health problems.
So having a strong support system throughout life can actually buffer us against the wear and tear of aging.
It can. I wonder if this difference in health outcomes is reflected in their brain activity as well.
Oh, that's a good question.
That's a great question. Davidson actually looked at the brain activity of these graduates and found that Jill, who had the healthier relationship history, had greater activity in her left prefrontal cortex. This pattern is associated with positive emotions and resilience.
Interesting.
Jane, who had experienced more relationship stress, showed the opposite pattern, suggesting a greater tendency towards negative emotions and a slower recovery from setbacks.
So our relationships can literally shape our brains, influencing our emotional tendencies and our resilience in the face of challenges.
They can. This makes me think about the saying, happiness is the best medicine.
Yeah.
It seems like there might be a real biological basis for that.
There very well might be. But what's even more fascinating is that the benefits of social connection extend beyond mood and resilience.
Yeah.
Goleman delves into the concept of social epigenetics, which is the idea that our relationships can actually influence how our genes express themselves.
Yes.
Wait a minute, are you telling me that our relationships can actually change our DNA?
Not exactly change our DNA sequence,
Okay.
but they can influence which genes are turned on or off.
Okay.
Goleman highlights the research of Janice Kiecolt-Glaser and Ronald Glaser, who studied women caring for husbands with Alzheimer's disease.
Oh, wow.
These caregivers, who were under immense stress,
Yeah.
showed troubling changes in their immune function,
Okay.
including a 50% decrease in the expression of a gene that regulates crucial immune mechanisms.
So the chronic stress of caregiving was actually impairing their ability to fight off disease by affecting their gene expression.
That's what the research suggests. And it's not just immune function that's affected. They also found that these caregivers had shorter telomeres, which are markers of cellular aging,
Wow.
suggesting that stress can actually accelerate the aging process.
That's a pretty sobering thought.
Yeah.
But if I remember correctly, Goleman also talks about the positive side of this.
He does.
He mentions that social support can actually buffer against these negative effects.
Yes. He highlights the inspiring story of Philip Simmons, a man with ALS who lived well beyond his prognosis,
Wow.
thanks to the incredible support of his community.
That's amazing.
His friends and neighbors created a network of care that allowed him to live his final years with dignity and joy.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And the amazing thing is, the people who provided that care reported feeling like they were the ones receiving the gift.
Oh.
It's a beautiful example of the reciprocal benefits of social support.
It's truly heartwarming.
Yeah.
But how does social support actually translate into these tangible benefits?
Yeah.
What are the biological mechanisms at play here?
Goleman points to oxytocin again,
Okay.
describing it as a stress hormone downregulator. This means that oxytocin actually reduces the activity of the HPA axis,
Okay.
the system that gets triggered when we're stressed.
Right. Remember the study where holding a loved one's hand during a stressful situation significantly reduced activity in the brain regions associated with stress response?
Yes.
So a simple act of physical touch can actually calm our brains and protect us from the negative effects of stress.
Exactly.
And the more satisfied the woman was in her marriage, the stronger this calming effect was.
Yeah.
It's like having a built-in stress reliever in the form of a loving partner.
Exactly. And don't forget about the tend and befriend response, which we talked about earlier.
Right.
Oxytocin also plays a key role in this stress response that's unique to women.
Right. So when women are under stress, their brains release more oxytocin, which motivates them to seek social support and has a calming effect. This might explain why women tend to reach out to others when they're stressed, while men are more likely to withdraw.
That's a possible explanation. And this tendency to tend and befriend can have significant health benefits for women.
Okay.
Studies have shown that women with strong social networks are less likely to develop physical impairments as they age
Wow.
and are more likely to lead joyful lives in their later years.
That makes a lot of sense. So building and maintaining strong social connections is essential for women's well-being, not just emotionally, but physically as well.
It is. But if women are biologically wired to connect,
Right.
why do we see so many studies showing that marriage seems to be better for men's health than women's?
That's a great question, and one that Goleman addresses directly.
He does.
Okay.
He highlights a 13-year study that looked at marital satisfaction in women.
Okay.
They found that the happier a woman was in her marriage, the better her health.
Mm-hmm.
Women who enjoyed spending time with their partners, felt good about their communication and felt supported, had lower blood pressure, lower glucose levels,
Oh, wow.
and lower cholesterol.
So it's not that marriage is inherently bad for women's health.
Right.
It's that the quality of the marriage really matters.
Exactly. Previous studies often lumped together data from both happy and unhappy wives, which skewed the results.
Okay.
When you control for marital satisfaction, the health benefits of marriage become evident for both men and women.
This makes me think about the Tolstoys again.
Yeah.
Their tumultuous marriage was clearly a source of stress for both of them, despite their achievements and large family.
It was. And Goleman cites research showing that marital conflict can trigger a cascade of negative physiological changes,
Okay.
including increases in stress hormones and decreases in immune function. This can be especially harmful for older couples whose bodies are already more vulnerable to the effects of stress.
So those little arguments and disagreements we have with our partners, if they become a chronic pattern, can actually take a toll on our health, especially as we age.
That's right. And it seems women might be more biologically reactive to relationship conflict than men.
Really?
This might be because women tend to place a higher value on close relationships
Okay.
and are more attuned to the emotional nuances of those relationships.
Right. They're also more likely to ruminate on upsetting encounters, which can prolong the stress response.
So it's not just the conflict itself, but how we process and cope with that conflict that matters.
Exactly. Didn't Goleman talk about John Gottman's research on the ratio of positive to negative interactions in relationships?
Yes, he did. What was that ratio again?
He did. Gottman found that the ratio of positive to negative moments in a relationship is a strong predictor of both longevity and health.
Right. The magic ratio is 5-to-1.
Yes.
5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction. That seems achievable, but I'm sure it's easier said than done.
It definitely takes effort and awareness.
Yeah.
But Gottman's research suggests that this ratio might predict more than just relationship happiness.
Really?
It might also be a key indicator of physical health.
That's incredible. So by simply paying attention to the balance of positive and negative interactions in our relationships, we can potentially improve both our emotional and physical well-being.
It's certainly worth striving for.
But it's important to remember that this isn't just about romantic relationships.
Okay.
Goleman also emphasizes the importance of social support in other areas of life, particularly for those facing illness or other challenges.
I imagine that having a strong support system during times of illness or hardship can make a huge difference.
It absolutely can. Goleman argues that we need to shift our healthcare system away from a model of isolation and towards a model of connection, recognizing the vital role that social support plays in the healing process.
This makes perfect sense. If our relationships can literally impact our biology, then it seems like healthcare providers should be paying more attention to those connections.
They should. And Goleman points to some promising trends in this direction, including the growing movement towards patient-centered care and the increasing emphasis on the importance of doctor-patient communication.
But it's not just about doctors and nurses, right?
No.
Goleman also talks about the importance of friends and family in the healing process.
He does. He shares a very moving story about John F. Kennedy Jr. comforting his dying cousin, Anthony Radziwill, by singing a lullaby their mothers used to sing to them.
Oh, wow.
It's a powerful reminder of the profound comfort and support that loved ones can provide, even in the face of death.
It's a beautiful image that speaks to that deep human need for connection, especially when we're vulnerable or in pain.
Yeah.
But I can also imagine that it's not always easy for friends and family to provide support, especially when they're dealing with their own fears and anxieties.
That's true. Goleman acknowledges that emphasizing that even just being present, offering a listening ear or a comforting touch can make a world of difference.
So we don't need to have all the answers or know exactly what to say.
Right.
Sometimes just showing up and being there is enough.
Exactly. And Goleman stresses that this kind of social support isn't just beneficial for patients.
Okay.
It can also protect caregivers from burnout and compassion fatigue. He highlights the importance of creating supportive communities where caregivers can share their experiences, receive emotional nourishment, and feel valued for the essential work they do.
It truly takes a village to support each other through life's challenges, especially when those challenges involve illness or loss.
Yeah.
Goleman seems to be saying that social intelligence is a key ingredient in building these supportive communities.
That's right. Social intelligence isn't just about understanding our own emotions. It's also about understanding the emotions of others and using that understanding to build strong, supportive relationships.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, from the biology of love to the importance of social support in healthcare.
We have.
But we've focused mainly on the benefits of social connection.
Right.
I'm wondering if Goleman also discusses how our emotions can impact our performance in other areas of life,
Okay.
like our work or creative endeavors.
He does. In fact, he explores a fascinating concept called emotional flow, which is the idea that our emotions can either enhance or hinder our performance depending on how we manage them.
That's interesting. Could you tell us more about this concept?
Well, remember the inverted U of performance we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Goleman applies the same principle to our emotional states.
Okay.
Both too little and too much emotional arousal can be detrimental to our ability to achieve our goals.
I see. So just like with stress, there's an optimal level of emotional engagement for peak performance.
Right.
Could you give us an example of what this looks like in real life?
He uses the analogy of driving to work while trying to plan a meeting
Okay.
and suddenly being startled by an ambulance siren.
Hmm.
That jolt of adrenaline, while helpful in an emergency,
Right.
can actually impair our ability to focus and think clearly.
That's relatable.
Yeah.
It's like our brains get thrown off track and can't concentrate on the task at hand.
Exactly. Goleman calls this frazzle, right?
Yes, and he argues that this kind of frazzle is a common experience in our modern, fast-paced world, and it can have significant consequences for our productivity and creativity.
Yeah.
So if we're constantly bombarded with stressors, both big and small, it can actually make us less effective at work.
That's what the research suggests. Goleman points out that when we're stressed, our brains shift from the high road of conscious, deliberate thought
Right.
to the low road of automatic, habitual responses.
It's like our brains get stuck in fight or flight mode,
Right.
and we lose access to our higher cognitive functions, which we need for problem solving and creative thinking.
Exactly. And Goleman emphasizes that this isn't just a problem for individuals.
Yeah.
It can also impact entire organizations. He talks about the importance of creating work environments that minimize stress and foster a sense of psychological safety.
I can see how that would be beneficial for both individual and team performance.
Yeah.
Does Goleman talk about any specific strategies for creating this type of positive work environment?
He does. He argues that leaders in particular play a crucial role in setting the emotional tone for their teams. Remember the example he gives about the company leader who intentionally picked on his friend, the marketing director, during meetings
Oh, yeah.
to get everyone's attention?
Yes, it seemed a bit manipulative, but I'm curious to hear Goleman's take on it.
Well, Goleman points out that while this specific tactic might be questionable,
Right.
effective leaders often use emotional contagion to motivate their teams.
Okay.
He cites research showing that leaders who are upbeat and positive tend to have teams that are more productive and make better decisions.
So it's like their positive energy is contagious
Yeah,
and inspires their team to perform better.
exactly. On the other hand, leaders who are grumpy and negative can create a climate of fear and anxiety that actually impairs performance.
It's amazing how a leader's emotional state can have such a ripple effect on their team.
It can.
So it's not just about technical skills and expertise.
Right.
It's about being aware of our own emotions and how they impact others, especially in leadership roles.
Absolutely. And Goleman argues that this ability to manage emotions effectively is a key aspect of social intelligence, which he calls the other kind of smart.
I like that.
It's just as important, if not more so, than traditional measures of intelligence.
It seems like Goleman is advocating for a whole new way of thinking about intelligence,
He is.
one that recognizes the importance of our social and emotional skills.
Exactly. And I think what makes Goleman's work so compelling is that he doesn't just present the science.
Right.
He also offers practical advice on how to cultivate social intelligence and build stronger, healthier relationships.
I'm eager to hear more about this practical advice. After exploring the biology of connection and its impact on our well-being, I'm definitely feeling inspired to put this knowledge into action.
Me too.
Let's dive into that in the next part of our deep dive. So after exploring all these fascinating insights about social intelligence, the big question is, how do we actually put this knowledge into action?
Well, that's a great goal. And luckily, Goleman provides a lot of practical advice on how to do just that.
Okay, great.
One of the key takeaways for me is the importance of recognizing and managing our own emotional states.
Okay.
Remember the inverted U we talked about?
Yeah.
Being aware of our own emotional sweet spot is crucial for both our well-being and our performance.
Right. We need to find that balance between being too laid back and totally stressed out.
Exactly.
But how do we actually do that? How do we find that sweet spot and stay there?
Goleman suggests is that it starts with self-awareness.
Okay.
We need to pay attention to how our emotions are impacting our thoughts, behaviors, and interactions with others.
Okay.
He recommends practicing mindfulness,
Right.
which can help us become more aware of our emotional states in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
This awareness allows us to make conscious choices about how we respond to challenges and how we regulate our emotions.
So it's about tuning into our inner world and recognizing how our emotions are driving our actions.
Exactly.
It makes sense that we can't manage our emotions effectively if we're not even aware of them in the first place. But what about when we're already feeling overwhelmed or stressed out? What are some strategies for getting back to that sweet spot?
Goleman offers a whole toolkit of strategies.
Yeah.
He talks about the importance of cognitive reappraisal,
Okay.
which involves consciously reframing our thoughts about a situation to change our emotional response.
Okay.
For example, instead of seeing a challenging task as a threat,
Yeah.
We can try to see it as an opportunity for growth.
So it's about shifting our perspective.
Yeah.
It's like looking for the silver lining in a difficult situation.
Exactly. And Goleman emphasizes that this isn't about denying or suppressing our emotions.
Okay.
It's about acknowledging them and then choosing a more helpful way to think about them.
Okay.
He also talks about the importance of finding healthy coping mechanisms for stress, like exercise, spending time in nature, or engaging in creative activities.
Those are all great strategies for managing our own emotions. But what about when we're dealing with other people's emotions, especially when those emotions are negative or challenging? How can we navigate those situations with social intelligence?
That's where empathy comes in.
Okay.
Goleman emphasizes the importance of being able to understand and respond to the emotions of others. He suggests practicing active listening, which involves paying close attention to what the other person is saying, both verbally and non-verbally,
Right.
and reflecting back what you hear to ensure understanding.
So it's about really tuning in to the other person and trying to see things from their perspective.
Yeah.
Not just listening to their words, but also paying attention to their body language and tone of voice.
Precisely.
Mm.
And Goleman points out that empathy isn't just about feeling sorry for someone.
Okay.
It's about connecting with them on a human level, acknowledging their feelings, and offering support.
Right.
He also suggests practicing compassion,
Okay.
which involves taking action to alleviate the suffering of others.
Mm.
This might involve offering practical help, a listening ear, or simply a kind word.
It seems like these skills, self-awareness, emotional regulation, empathy, and compassion, are essential for building and maintaining healthy relationships.
They are.
They're the foundation for a more connected and fulfilling life.
I agree. And what's encouraging is that Goleman believes these skills can be learned and strengthened with practice.
Oh, that's great.
He offers a variety of exercises and techniques for developing social intelligence, like practicing mindfulness, engaging in perspective taking, and cultivating gratitude.
So we're not stuck with whatever level of social intelligence we were born with.
Nope.
We can actually improve our ability to connect with others and navigate the complexities of our social world.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most hopeful and empowering messages of Goleman's work.
Yeah.
By understanding the science of social intelligence, we can all take steps to enhance our relationships and create a more compassionate and connected world.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. It's like we've been given a roadmap for building stronger relationships and living a more fulfilling life. If our relationships can literally shape our biology, what steps can we take today to cultivate more nourishing connections and minimize toxic ones?
That's the question, isn't it? What resonated with you in this deep dive?
Hmm.
Maybe it's being more mindful of your own emotional patterns or practicing active listening with your loved ones.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's setting boundaries in a relationship that's become draining or expressing gratitude more often to those who support you.
There are so many things we can do, both big and small, to make our relationships healthier and more fulfilling.
There are.
And it all starts with understanding the power of social intelligence. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've gained some valuable insights that will help you cultivate deeper connections and live a more meaningful life.